Hey folks, it's Zero with Cerebral Tackle. We're going to try something new. I'm going to call these Bedtime Stories with Cerebral Tackle. It's where I'm going to take you down memory lane, a story from my fishing past, and see if it strikes a chord with you. I suffer from insomnia, and sometimes the best way I know how to relax is to take myself back in time to a place that I really enjoyed with a fishing memory and kind of allow myself to lull off to sleep. So, I hope this strikes a chord with you and brings back some of your favorite memories from the sport we all share such a passion for. And if it does and reminds you of something, leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know about it. I'd love to hear it. So, tonight, for this first endeavor, I'm going to take you back to one of my most treasured fishing memories. It's what got me addicted to trout fishing. Let's see. Imagine a kid 8 or 9 years old in the early 1980s. I'd been with my mother visiting my grandparents and some family in Arkansas. And it was over Christmas break. We were on our way back, and we passed by a lake that had a river system attached to it. Now, my mother said something about she thought there may be trout there, so we had our fishing gear. We were going to take a detour and look. Pretty much any time we went fishing, or anytime we went on the road, we had our fishing gear with us. So that wasn't new. So, as we're coming back past this stream, my mother told me to keep my eyes open, to be looking for any access area, side road. She's driving down these windy roads. She kind of need to keep her eyes on the road. So I was the lookout, right? I need to look for any place we could pull off, gain access to the river, and, try to find somewhere to fish. Keep in mind, I had only had 2 dalliances with trout before this. One positive, kind of, the other negative. The positive one was, I believe, my first. I can't remember if it was first or second. But the positive one was only positive from a fish catching standpoint, not from a learning. The first one was at a trout hatchery in Arkansas, where you literally showed up, caught fish, paid by the pound, and left. These were not smartened up stream trout. These were dumber than a box of rocks. They were big, they were fun, but they were stupid. By that, I mean you could catch them on a cane pole with braided line, a huge hook, and literally hatchery food attached to the end of the hook. Trout by DNA, and that's about it. Now, the other experience with trout was completely opposite. That was at Roaring River State Park in Missouri. Now, they do have some put-in takeout state stockers there because the hatchery's right there. But a lot of those fish get smart, fattened up over the off season, and become impossible to catch. And well, that was what my second experience with trout was. Whatever I had to offer these guys, they weren't buying. I didn't have light line. I had big line that I used for bass, catfish, crappie. It was probably 12 or 14. And these trout just thought I was the dumbest thing to ever walk the face of the earth. And when it comes to trout fishing at that point in my life, they were right. So, having had just those 2 experiences, here you have this kid and his mom driving down these windy Ozark roads, trying to find a place to pull off and trout fish. We come around one bend, I see this little sign in the road. And by sign, I mean like a garage sale sign. A small little homemade sign that you put on the little metal pegs and just kind of stick it into the ground. It read Trout Camp and had an arrow going off down this side road. So I told my mom, hey, that sign said Trout. It said Trout Camp, I think. My mother's like, you're seeing stuff. You didn't see that. And I was begging her, yeah, I did. We got to go back. That sign said Trout Camp. There's trout down there. She argued with me for 4 or 5 miles down the road. And I was desperately trying to convince her I wanted to fish so bad. Finally, she says, okay, I'm going to turn and go back, but if it doesn't say trout, you're in trouble. So we turned around and drove back. I knew I was fine because I knew what I read. Sure enough, we get to it. Trout Camp. So we turn off and go down the little road. The road winds for just a little distance and then cuts off on another road and eventually leads to this little country house. There's a little wooden sign that hung across the door of this little home that said office. So while I stayed in the car, my mom wandered into the office and talked to the nice lady. It was a mom and pop shop. It was family owned little business. My mom talked to the wife of the gentleman that owned the place, and this lady taught my mom how to splice line to line so we could get 4-pound test line to our 8 or 10 or whatever we had with us, and showed us some different split shot methods and like little slip rigs to use, like a Carolina rig kind of, but for trout, and how to tie leaders. And so we did. The lady got us spooled up with some 4-pound test line and got us the trout stamps we needed and licenses, all that good stuff, and sold us a jar of salmon eggs. So we followed the little gravel road through the gate, down around a bend, and found a little access area. Like I said, it was Christmas vacation. It was cold, and for whatever reason, there was not people there. There was my mom, myself, and a gentleman. A very nice gentleman, which would later become very good friends with our family. So he was down, a couple 100 feet from where I was fishing. He was talking to my mom and giving us tips about how to catch fish, where to fish on the stream. And like I said, a super nice guy. And he told us to concentrate on the ripples and the eddies and little swirls. Well, the stream was below a major lake, and the power plant started generating, so the water started creeping up. The area of the bank I was on was a steep drop-off, like literally went straight off the edge, 4 or 5 feet down to the riverbed. Well, the water started coming up that, okay? So instead of having to cast out to get to water, it started coming right up to my feet. And there was a little cut-in at my feet. And I mean like an erosion area, just where about a 2-foot in diameter hole where the soil had just eroded away, right? Creating this little cut-in. Well, the water started creeping up that cut-in and filling it up. So by the time the water got up the top, we had a 5-foot little, or 5 foot deep, 4 or 5 foot deep, little 2-foot in diameter hole where the water would come in and swirl around and spit back out. So I'm sitting there thinking, this is like one of those swirls the guy was talking about. So I grabbed my line, which did not have a trout hook. Not a 10, not a 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. Nope. It had a number 6 Aberdeen crappie hook. Yes. A number 6 Aberdeen Eagle Claw crappie hook. So What did I do? This guy had told us to hide the hook, make sure the hook wasn't visible. So I took him literally. I must have put 12 salmon eggs on that damn hook. Threaded them one at a time meticulously. From the point, clear up the shank, up over the eye and the knot. Covered that whole damn hook in salmon eggs. Put a little split shot above it, and I dropped it off in this little hole. Now, I remember laying on my stomach, peering over this hole, watching my line swirl around and around and around in kind of a little hypnotic fashion. And I must have been there for 45 minutes or an hour. And all of a sudden, I see my rod go thump, 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 thump. And I waited, and I waited. And finally, that trout pulled that rod tip down and hung it down for just a split second, long enough for me to set the hook. And I had my first stream trout. Nothing huge, probably 12, 13 inches. But it was my very first stream trout. I had a little knife with me that my grandfather had given me. I cleaned the trout on the edge of the river and took him home to eat him. Now, the gentleman that my mother was talking to told her about a trout tournament this trout camp had every spring, and how we needed to look into coming back and fishing it. I had recently moved to a new school and was having a hard time adjusting. My mother told me if my grades got better, we would come back and fish this trout tournament. That got me excited, but I'll be honest, I had kind of forgotten about the deal. We come back home, and I went back to school. In the following February, my mother said she needed to have a conversation with me. We need to have a talk. And of course, especially as a kid, you're like, crap, what have I done now? So she took me out to eat at one of those cafeteria restaurants. You know, you might know them now as a Furr's. Some places there used to be Luby's. Well, this was a Wyatt's cafeteria. Now, Wyatt's, I mean, it was a good place to eat in the 80s. But she takes me to this place, sits me down, and she's like, well, I've got to talk to you. And I'm waiting on the punchline, whatever it's going to be, right? And she says, remember when I told you that if your grades got better, we would go fish that trout tournament? Like I said, I kind of forgot about the deal, but the second she mentioned it, I was like, yeah, I actually do remember that, okay. Well, guess what? My grades had got considerably better. So she informed me she had booked us a cabin. Now, this was early February. The trout tournament wasn't till mid-March, spring break. So, yeah, you know what I was doing, right? Marking the freaking days off my calendar. That was my only focus. I was going to get to go trout fishing again. I was going to get to fish my first tournament. I was ecstatic. So, my mother was in talks with my grandfather. And my grandmother, you know, on her side, and they love to fish. As a matter of fact, my grandfather got me fishing. He's the one that first got me hooked. That's a story for another day. So they decided they wanted to come down too. So all of a sudden, there were 4 people booked for this itty-bitty little tiny cabin. I mean, small. But the day finally came. I remember being at school, waiting on my mom to pick me up. There was me and one other girl waiting to be picked up from school. Everybody else had left, and I mean, I was pacing. I just wanted to get on the freaking road. I couldn't wait. I was just chomping at the bit. She shows up. The car's packed. We immediately head out. Now, I hadn't eaten since lunch. I was starving. We drive the 5 hours or so it takes to get there. 5.5 maybe. We pull up, and my grandparents had beat us there. And when I walked in the door, I was blown away by the smell of food. My grandmother was one hell of a cook. And I don't know how she did it without blowing a fuse in that place. Because this is just, the smallest of little cabins. But she had brought a slow cooker with her and a deep fryer. And she had made the best slow cooked beef stew. The best down home country beef stew you've ever had. And for dessert, fried pies. Lots of them. Cherry, blueberry, apricot, peach, apple. Holy crap. If there's a pie filling for it, she made it. And I was starving. And it was awesome. So we get all of our tackle in and we get settled in because we don't have a lot of time. The tournament began the next morning bright and early. At like 6 o'clock in the morning. So we got all of our tackle sorted, and we all crammed into our beds. There were two little single beds, and then one bed in the loft, and then a little futon by the window. And I'm not talking about a futon with legs. No. Wasn't enough room for that. This futon was one of those fold-out cushion-only futons that had like the big square blocks that when they were all put together, it was just like a tall chair with a round cushion for a back. Then when you folded it out, the round cushion was the headrest. That's what this was. Being the kid, that was my bed for the night. So, laying against the front wall of this little cabin, on this little futon, I was so excited I couldn't sleep. And outside, I heard people file into this camp all night long. One of my most favorite, cherished memories in life is the sound of those trucks coming in, driving over that gravel road, and that sound of the gravel as it kind of crunches and shifts is so relaxing and soothing. And I heard that all night long. Because see, while this was a small little trout camp in the middle of nowhere, this tournament was a big deal. People from all over the United States visited this tournament. This tournament had 3 different sites and multiple divisions you could fish in. There was a site there at the trout camp, one at the dam, and one downstream at a river road access area. Now, each site held between 300 and 600 anglers. So no matter where you fished, it was elbow to elbow. The divisions is you could fish spinning tackle for spinning lures. You could fish fly fishing. You could fish natural bait. Or if you were a kid like me, you were like in the under 14, under 16, whatever division, and you could fish whatever kind of bait you wanted. Lures, trout jigs, naturals, whatever. So, I laid there all night long. I might have got 2 hours sleep. But listening to people file in, listening to tent campers out reveling with their buddies, drinking beer, telling jokes, laughing, cheerful. Everybody was having a good time. Everybody was excited. And all night long, the trucks drove in, hauling people and families with fifth wheel campers and RVs and tent stakes getting hammered on and put up, and the smell of campfires in the air. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So finally, the next morning came. I got up bright and early, donned my vest, donned my waders, grabbed my ultralight, and was ready to go. Got down to the little check-in area where I got my badge to identify me and put it on my vest for everybody to see. They had coffee and donuts. Yeah, I was like 8 or 9, but yeah, I freaking had my coffee and my donuts. Don't sue me. So the shotgun went off, literally shotgun start tournament, and everybody ran to their place in the river. Now, I couldn't wait to use some bait from the little tackle store that I'd got up the road. There was this nice little tackle store that had everything for crappie and bass and catfish and trout and striper. And oh man, this place, I'd bought a super duper. Don't fall for the imitation. If you're just trout fishing, get a real super duper. Lure Jensen super duper. I believe it's made by Lure Jensen. And if not, screw me. Okay. But anyway, a 500 series is the size I used. There's a 501, which is a bit bigger, but I prefer the 500. So anyway, I'd bought a little 500 super duper up there at this little bait shop, and I bought something else I couldn't wait to use. They called it was made by Wasp Euro brand tackle. And this was called Wasp Euro larva. Don't let the name fool you. It was not wasp larva. They were colored maggots. They were dyed live maggots in pastel colors from pinks and oranges and reds and yellows and blues and some purples. But they were left feeding in a bed that had some dyed colors on them. Now those little guys are popular up north for ice fishing, and they tip them on ice jigs. Well, kind of fished with them and trout in the same way. We'd have little teardrop ice jigs and thread 2 or 3 of those in the back of those and on the back of those little hooks. Throw it out, let it bump across the river, and whenever it landed in front of a trout's nose, 3 little wiggling bright colored maggies, they chomped on them. So I had my super dupers, I had my maggies. I couldn't wait to fish. I caught my first trout limit. Got 5 fish. And the way they scored was not by weight, but by length. They threw out the length of your smallest. They measured your top 4, combined them together, and that was your score. Now, I didn't end up with first, second, or third. I left without hardware that first tournament. But the family got hardware. Now, like I said, people would come in from all over the U.S. and even from Europe. But they flew in close and then drove. They had a trophy for the family who drove the furthest distance. We won that, as odd as that seems. Our 5-hour or so trip was enough to qualify us as having driven the furthest distance for that tournament. So, there you have it. It's the story of how I got addicted to trout fishing. From Roaring River State Park in Missouri to a trout hatchery in Arkansas to this little Ozark River and a trout tournament. Now, when I mean addicted, that trout tournament was the first one of the next 18 consecutive trout tournaments I would fish there. 18. growing up, I didn't have a lot of constants in life. A lot of moving around places to place, just not a lot of constants. However, one constant every year, spring break, trout tournament. That same one with those same people, making friends that would last for years and years and years. People we couldn't wait to see, that we only saw once a year. But if you didn't know them by name, you knew them by face. And you were always greeted with a handshake and a hug. You could always go to other campsites and share your food with them, and they would share their food with yours. And you would get there and go to the same campsites because everybody tended to book their campsites a year in advance. So you tended to know where everyone was staying. So once you made an acquaintance, you got there and wanted to go look them up, see how they were doing, catch up with them, bullshit with them. You just go to where you found them the year before. Chances are they were there. If not, they were very close by. And we made lifelong friends. So, yeah. All from seeing a sign on the side of the road, a little yard sale sign with the words Trout Camp. Going down a stretch of back road, windy highway on a whim, just trying to find a place to wet a line. Started a tradition, and one of my favorite all-time memories. I really hope you enjoyed this story. I do. I hope it brings back memories for you, some of your fishing past. And if you want to share them, please feel free to drop them in the comments below. And I hope this helped you relax and take you to a different place. And who knows, maybe you'll get some rest. Maybe I'll get some rest. But we're going to try this fishing story thing and see how it works, okay? So, until next time, keep your lines wet and your hearts full. And this is Zero from Cerebral Tackle. And we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.